Also, as part of the Little Richard doc, we had Valerie June. And Love to Love You, Donna Summer. We have directors Roger Ross Williams and Marcus Dunn. Thank you all for being here, and thanks for the conversion reviews. You're doing back your tremendous films. Anyway, I want to start with you, Lisa. With your Little Richard film, did you place it more as like an introduction to Little Richard, or like a reframing of the history that's already known?
I would say it's a reframing and a decolonizing of music docs and who's given permission to tell a story and have innovation with the telling of it.
So
I like that word.
The
Innovation and decolonizing.
So innovation, I can understand what you're going for. What is decolonization of rock docs? Like, what is the problem that plagues rock docs?
Being pedantic, hagiography, no breaking of the fourth wall, and a lot of talk about the music, like how do we touch the hearts, and that's why this lady here joined us in the Dreamscapes.
And can you describe what those dreamscapes are? Because there are a few of them in film.
When we first went out pitching this film, I always talked about this desire to have dreamscapes, which I saw as seminal moments in Richard's life when his sense of possibility shifted. These were portals that he kind of enters into in the cosmology that we create in this film. So these are portals that propel him to the next. So if it's meeting Sister Rosetta Tharpe when he's 14, who sees him not only as a musician, but as a queer person. And that allows Richard to see he could be a star one day. Or when he kind of redoes Tutti Frutti and brings in kind of the energy and lewdness that he had not been incorporating into his music before. Like all of these things propel him forward. And then there's just the emotional moment, with Pastor John McKee when Richard hits rock bottom.
Yeah, and these are all three moments that you essentially don't have footage of those moments, so it's important to have something that propels the story forward.
Yeah, it's to give a sense of interiority and emotionality in equal doses.
Yes. What misconceptions do you think the public has about Little Richard that this might change?
I think the misconceptions depend on how old you are. So for some people, they only know about Shut Up. Him being this kind of tragic comic figure on talk shows, like high drag and campy. I've been, last weekend I was in Bend, Oregon, and the average age of that audience was 65. There were people who had seen him perform. He fueled their rebellion as a team to embrace the power of rock and roll music, which I think is a power of possibility. And and I think with the film, we've shown the many different Richards, whether it's the glitter outfit, the high drag, or the super religious Richard. And I think those are all really compelling phases and accompanying musics in his life.
Yeah, one of the things that did surprise me about the film was how compelling the spiritual elements are, because those were elements that I've read about but not seen a lot of footage for. And so, how did you sculpt that part?
When we started the film, we did a very deep archival dive. I don't know if Gideon's here. Yay! Hi, Gideon. Good to see you in person. And so Gideon they helped us to just find a ton of archivals through the years. I knew in telling the story I wanted to center his voice, to give him the agency that he always seemed to be asking for. And in doing the research and this deep dive, we were able to determine that we could tell his story from the very early, rock and roll films, 1955, to his death with audio that, we also were able to stumble upon.
Yeah, it seems in both films that you both were working with a real surplus of great footage, because with the Donna Summer film, there was a lot of personal footage there. And would you care to explain the source of that, Brooklyn?
Well, the source is really my family. But no, we, as we kind of were going through the archive, we realized just how much we had. And, when Roger and I first talked about doing this film together, we were like, no, this is where we need to lean in on this. Because in our film as well, we wanted to center my mother, Donna, as this, center it from her perspective. And a lot of these, family, photos and footage, she was the one behind the camera. And so, we were just like, oh, this is gold. You really get a sense of who somebody is from this perspective, and with this kind of footage, unfiltered, their real personality, her humor, and you see what was important to her through that.
So, as far as filmmakers, Roger and Brooklyn, what sort of guiding principle were you going for the film? Do you believe that there were misconceptions you needed to address, or how does this film set the record straight?
I think it was really important for us to first tell the truth. An unadulterated, just real honest perspective of who she was. Not just the persona, because I think everybody has this idea of the disco queen, which is partially true. It's just not the whole story. And so I think it was really important for us to peel back all the different facets and all the different layers of who she was, her personality, her gifting, her talents. It was really important for her not just to be known as a singer, but as a songwriter and a real artist. And while she didn't really go for awards per se, she wanted to be respected among her peers as a real artist, as a songwriter. That was something that was really important to her. And so I think that was one of the things that we wanted to really show through this film, was that she was a creative genius in her own way. And so that was one of the tenets of this is one of the pillars of this film.
She also had deep internal conflict. What attracted me to her story is that, I grew up in the church singing in the choir. My father was a minister. I was an illegitimate child of that minister. And Donna's experience in the church, the abuse she suffered in the church, that hold on her never left her, and was part of her music. And in the film, Elton John says, when you're on the dance floor and a Donna Summer song comes on, there's something that touches you deep in your soul. And that was the pain that she had suffered. That as gay people, we identified with that we heard that in her voice, in her music. We could feel the pain that she had gone through, and it touched us. And I didn't want to, that was a really important part of the story to tell. Not to shy away from the pain and the struggle that her whole life, and like little Richard coming back to the church and finding religion in the end, and the intense conflict of that was really important, because when Brooklyn and I first started talking, first thing I said to her was, what kind of story do you want to tell? And she's like, unflinching. It has to be honest. It has to really go to the places that was even tough for Brooklyn and her family to go. And she learned, and things were revealed to all the members of the family as we were making this film.
How did you process those revelations?
Step by step. I would have conversations with my sister, and I'd be like, I didn't know this. And even little things, little details that you're like, oh, this shouldn't be earth-shattering. But one of the things that she said to me, my sister Mimi is here, is that, every time you have a new detail, you have to process that in your own idea of what your own personal history was. And so there was a lot to process, and some of those conversations were tricky and really, not everybody is always fully ready to take those conversations to that place. But I really, tried to not push, but just are, that people need to see people having these conversations, because in having those conversations and being truthful about what happened, there is healing. And so there was healing for all of us, and there was a cathartic experience for all of us in doing the process of making this film, but also hopefully the viewer is also able to experience that for themselves. Give them permission. You want to give people permission.
There's a lot of tears, and
I'm a crier, okay?
She's a crier. She may cry today.
No.
But Brooklyn,
Don't make Brooklyn cry.
Brooklyn, I love making people cry. Brooklyn,
He's a crier too, just FYI. He's a crier too.
I cried a lot. Brooklyn, it was tough for her to convince a lot of her family members to participate.
That was wonderful.
Donna's sisters who sang backup.
Really the aunties.
The aunties.
The aunties were, because also they come from a generation, particularly in the Black community and communities of color, like there are certain topics that you just don't talk about, or they don't want to really unearth. And so, there was multiple conversations beforehand for them to understand why this was important.
Yeah.
And particularly for my mother's story, why it was important. You can't really understand my mother and her journey without having a clear picture of what really happens.
And shout out to Joyce Bogart,
Yeah.
who had never spoken, and her son is here to Lindsay.
Evan.
Evan Bogart, Joyce's son. She had never spoken about Donna.
Never?
Never. Really? Publicly. I mean,
Not publicly,
So getting her and Susan Nail, Donna's manager, to talk for the first time was really tough. Even Peter, her abusive boyfriend, Brooklyn got him to open up and really talk about it. There's a lot there that didn't even get into the film that he said that was,
But one of the things that I think in the process of doing, once we were in the middle of those interviews, you could tell how healing it was for them to have this conversation, for them, because they're not ever forced to unpack all of this. And so it was for a first time they were really like reliving and processing their own history. And so I think particularly for Peter, there was kind of a full circle healing moment. He was very appreciative to be able to have that conversation, as I was appreciative for him for his honesty,
It is remarkable that he's on record in the film. I was surprised to see that. It's an extraordinary reception. Lisa, did you have trouble getting anybody on source, or did everybody consent?
I think the best story is Ernestine Penn. Because if you look her up, everyone says she's dead. And we were like looking high and low. And I was at a wedding in the Catskills, and I got a call from Liz Marsh, who's here, one of our great producers, along with Bobby and Karen. And Liz called me, and I had no reception. I get this sketchy thing like, Ernestine is called. And I'm like, whatever. Who is Ernestine? But it's just, I was like, she's dead. And Liz is like, no, she isn't. And she wants to talk. Well, we had finished the film. We were deep into post.
Okay.
We didn't have any more money to film. But, the group collectively said, let's find a creative solution. And we did an audio interview with her because there were things that were really important to Ernestine that Richard had shared with her. After they were divorced, they stayed friends.
Yeah.
And she just was like, I want people to know these things about me. I want to set the record straight.
What especially did she want to have on the record?
His faith, but that he also loved all people. And I think, we talk about this tension that these artists who come from this deeply religious background, who then in their forward presentation to the world are highly sexualized. And in his case, he can't even, at the end, he's having difficulty with accepting his queerness. So, there's a big conundrum in the gumbo going on. And so, but, I think it was interesting. It's like, yes, he loves God, and he believes that God loves everyone. And that, I think, was a wonderful coda to a life that had a lot of careening back and forth between the secular and the profane.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that was sort of like the defining characteristic of a lot of his, at least public life, was that yo-yoing. And something that's interesting to me is that I feel like his queerness has never been explored at the level that it is in this film. Like, it is acknowledged a lot, but not like how it actually influences his art, and then in turn the culture in general.
Well, the thing about Richard's queerness, I love one of our scholars, Andrea Robinson, who says, like, the South is the home of all things queer, and with Richard's story, even the time when he was in these, shows performing in drag as Princess Lavone, that's not the beginning of, this queer performance. It was really interesting to stumble upon these visuals that go back to the turn of the, 20th century, where there are Black men in drag, in performance. And then, the film obviously goes deeper into this space that Richard was able to navigate, find, and build community in. And so I think that when you look at the story of rock and roll, I think one of the greatest American exports, you would, it'd be a great disservice to not recognize where he got inspiration and energy from, in addition to the musical innovation, from his foremothers, like Sister Rosetta Tharpe and, Escarita, Jimmy Rock, all those great people.
Valerie, what attracted you to this project?
Well, the foremother, godmother of rock and roll, being such an influence on Little Richard's life, that's what attracted me to the project, because I'm a musician who worships her, basically. And so knowing that, made me curious when Lisa reached out to me, what's this project, what would you like me to do? And to play a Sister Rosetta song in the feature is what I was chosen to do. And I just was blown away when I saw the finished piece, because being an African American woman from the South and being raised in the church, and I too having struggled with my music, going from only being church songs growing up to, okay, now I'm going to switch these gospel songs that I was raised with to different lyrics with the same melodies but different lyrics, and just borrow like all the ancestors before me have, like Sister Rosetta and Richard, Mississippi John Hurt, and Elizabeth Cotton. I could go down a list of borrowers. And so it just, to me, was beautiful how she was weaving together, Lisa, with stardust and futuristic things, our ancestry and our past with the present.
Had you spent much time with Little Richard's music before, or was it the Sister Rosetta was the main attraction?
I hadn't spent much time with Little Richard's music, but I think he was such a powerful presence and influenced so much music, from Bowie to Mick Jagger and the Stones to like just endless, countless musicians, that you spend time with Little Richard's music whether you realize you do or not.
I would say the same true with Donna Summer in a way too.
Well, interestingly, the little fun fact is, speaking of rock and roll music, my mother won the first Grammy for female rock vocal, which I think is so interesting. But again, there is a connection to Little Richard in that, right? That thread is something that she wanted to bring through in her own voice. She didn't want to be limited to quote unquote disco, just dance music. So she brought all of those elements to her music. And yeah, I think when you kind of piece together all the different performances and the music, you see, particularly I Feel Love, which is basically the foundation of all electronic dance music today. Everybody that came after her, there's pieces of her in those songs and in those performers.
How wonderful was it that Beyonce did it it was a tribute basically to Donna Summer on that album.
girl, hey.
Are there other places that you can sense Little Richard's presence, Lisa, in pop culture?
Well, I think he's such a transgressive figure. It goes beyond the music.
Yeah.
You know, when I see somebody in their, you know, a man in their skirt, I'm like, that's because of Little Richard. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like, it's a ripple that happens to change culture. So, you know, if it's 1955 and you are, you know, Little Richard with your pencil thin mustache and, you know, femme forward in your presentation, and that really stamps that performance and visual was stamped on the popular consciousness. And then he's continuing to show up and get even more out there. You know, I think it is about giving permission, because you're normalizing something that had been kind of pushed aside for so long.
I think that's true, and also like the ripple effects. John Waters is in the film too, and he explains that his pencil mustache is directly inspired.
It's a tribute.
Exactly. No, it seems so obvious too.
And I just have to say too, when he is on the same show as Janis Joplin, and he goes and says, "Can you give me my mirror cape or something?"
Yes.
Fashion, the man, he transcends music. What he does with fashion is huge.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. So, but the ripple effect is interesting to me because as you said, his presence sort of permeates everything through modern, and that's the same thing with Donna Summer, is that there's ways that you don't quite realize until you see a documentary like this how they've changed. And to that effect, you have a very interesting talking heads like in your film, like, and there's a bunch of scholars and not the expected talking heads apart from maybe you get Mick Jagger on camera because he was hugely influenced by Richard.
Well, yeah, Mick Jagger was incredibly giving and effusive in his sharing and love. I think it was, you know, it was quite scary. We were chasing him for, I don't know, 9 months or whatever, and finally he's like, "Can you be in London tomorrow?" And I'm like, "I'm going to the airport now." I mean, and you know, and it was like, "Lisa, you only have 20 minutes with him." I was like, 20 minutes? Oh my gosh, I want to just talk to him forever about this. And then once he got there, he's like, "Well, why don't we have a chat first?" So, because I think he wanted to catch a vibe on the story I was interested in, and he's a big Sister Rosetta fan. So when he heard that, you know, she was being kind of placed within the family tree, I think that excited him, in addition to the, you know, the apprenticeship he had with Richard, like watching him for 30 days. But, you know, whether it's the scholars or Tom Jones and Mick Jagger and Nile Rodgers and Nona Hendrix, they're the Greek chorus, you know? I mean, like, it is always about Richard's voice being the North Star that is guiding us on this, you know, circuitous journey. And that was something that was really important to center in the telling of this.
Was Richard a reliable narrator in his interviews over the years? How often did he contradict himself?
Oh, he was the most unreliable narrator. But aren't we all at times?
Yeah.
We're all a little magical and we're all a little unreliable. And we're all beautifully human.
Did you find any complications in assembling like
Exactly that, right? You know, I think, and I think when you do have certain struggles or certain tension in your life, you do go here to here, you know, and you are trying to find your way through of what that truth is for the moment, you know? So yeah, you know, I think we were really lucky that we had the audio tapes from when she was working on her autobiography with her writer, and so we had hours of her talking about her life. it revealed certain relationships and people that we knew nothing about, that I'd never heard of before. So it was really like a gold mine to be able to have that. But then, you do say, oh, well, she said this here, but then here, so, and then that's where those other voices of the people closest to her, where you're really able to see, okay, this is what that was. So, I think...
even the autobiography was unreliable.
Yeah,
remember the first thing Brooklyn, one of the first things we talked about, you were like, people don't know my mom's name. Like her real name, and the autobiography had it wrong.
I will set the record straight. Her name is Donna Adrienne Gaines. Well, and even the Wikipedia page is LaDonna, and even in her book it was LaDonna. I was like, but who called her LaDonna? Her name was not LaDonna. I literally went to the Boston notary and was like, what does the actual birth certificate say? It is Donna. So like even in her book, I think that there were stories that she wasn't fully willing to be completely clear on. They were hazy. She would tell the story, but it was hazy. And I think part of our job was to bring clarity to those moments so that they could pierce people's hearts in a way that that book was not able to pierce. So.
How difficult of a process is that for you then, as her daughter, to want to speak the truth?
Honestly, not that difficult. I just feel like there's power in the truth. And if you're gonna do it, be honest. And so for me, in doing this project, there was no other way, really. And so, there was uncomfortable conversations or tricky conversations, but I just feel like it's worthwhile. And that's the story of humanity. And if you kind of sugarcoat things, then you miss out on that humanity a lot of the times. And I think that's very present in your film, and I hope is really present in our film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there were times where Brooklyn I would have the conversation. I would do the interview and have the conversation. It's all audio. So I would do the interview and have the conversation because Brooklyn was maybe too close, like her father, for instance. And there were times where Brooklyn had to, just because they would only talk to Brooklyn. So we would sort of...
We would tag team, or he would do one interview and then I did a follow-up interview, and so I think having the two of us was really like a secret weapon, in that way.
That makes sense. Some people are not ready to reveal everything to one source.
But to be honest with you, people were really honest with us from top to bottom. I think once we got them talking and they could see that they could trust us with the story, they were really honest because they knew my mother and they didn't feel like the world really knew who she was. And so it was important for them to kind of set the record straight as well.
We can make 10 films. We have all those interviews are like 7 hours long. So we had so much material.
What were the most painful cuts in both films? Or any areas that you wish you could have explored?
Well, we had to back into a specific runtime with our film, determined by our wonderful partners at CNN Films. And there were a lot of darlings that didn't make it, but the one I always loved, but it would have taken us on a tangent that was not really specific to the story, was, Richard is protesting ATV music to, because he hasn't received any royalties at all. And so John Branca, the entertainment attorney, appears on camera to say that it was really egregious for Richard not to get anything, even though he kind of broke his contract, so to speak, and signed off with specialty to allow them to not pay him anymore. But the reason why John Branca's there is twofold. One, he knew Richard. Richard officiated at his first marriage with his best man was Michael Jackson and Bubbles. And then when Michael Jackson buys the ATV catalog, he actually gave Richard money because he felt like, one, I have, sampled you, and two, seeing at, this these horrible things that had happened to particularly, Black artists for a long time, and so Michael gave him money. Yeah. And I love that story, but so we can make it go viral now or something.
I think for us, a couple of things, but I think one of the biggest things is we did interview so many different people, celebrities, non-celebrities, different boyfriends from the past, and so, one of the biggest decisions we had to make was, okay, which voices are we going to follow? So there were some really great stories that we didn't get to include from some amazing people, because we did decide, the strength in this film is the family and those closest to her, and those are the people that are the priority in following this story. So that was one thing.
It was a big turning point when we took out all the celebrity interviews. Lots of celebrities wanted to talk about Donna. We interviewed a lot of them, and then we had to really come to terms what the film really is. And for me, in my mind, it was just kind of like one giant home movie, and that it was the family. It was just their stories and their personal connection, to their mother or sister or even the Joyce Bogart and everyone around. They were family, really close. And so it was getting rid of we threw all that out, and that's when we really started to find what the film really is. So films are written, documentaries are written again. So, it was a process.
No, it is something that's notable about the film is that in both films, the celebrities are used in very clarifying ways. It helps illustrate certain musical points, and that's.
Well, Richard's a star.
Exactly.
There's not a lot of space for others.
Exactly, it's 100% true. They are the authors of their life, and that they are the star, and so that's who should be saying, "I am fabulous."
No, it's true. You want to just keep watching the footage of your stars at that point. Lisa, how did you try to convey how explosive Richard's music was in the 50s?
Our lead editor, Nineveh, came up with this wonderful device of showing this explosive, stars and birth and lava, and then I'd go let's get more rings of Saturn, So it was really to create a visual language that spoke to this supernatural cosmology, explosion, life force. So it's, a drag queen twirling around, it's a giraffe licking the head of a baby giraffe, it's a supernova. Because those, that is this big spectrum that he drew from internally and externally. There's no words that you can use, so we just leaned into that vocabulary.
All right. I think we're getting to the point where Valerie is going to take center stage. So, do you want to? Is that what you're about to do?
Yeah. And I wouldn't mind if you sang back up with me, and you can too.
Back in the band.
Yeah. It's called Strange Things Happening Every Day. And whenever she sings every day, then you have to repeat every day. Oh, every day.
Every day.
There's strange things happening every day.
Every day.
All right. I got it. We'll get set for that.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, Valerie June is one of the most amazing, gracious, giving people. We shot forever, and she just was such a gem to work with. You are a brilliant artist, and you are my supernova.